And welcome to In Discussion with Andy Hockley. I did call him a veteran on one of the posts. I did mean from an experience point of view, not an age point of view.
But I'm old too.
Andy, thank you very much for being here with us. I'm going to let Andy start off. We're going to quickly just talk about two of the courses that we run. And if you're watching this on YouTube, you can just find out about those courses by clicking on or just scanning the QR code in the video. And we are going to talk about Idiotum. Do you want to tell us what it is, how it runs, and how it works?
Yeah, so Idletim is a management course. I was just realizing this morning that we've been going for 25 years now, so I need to come up with some kind of celebratory thing to mark 25 years doing the Idletim. It's ma language teaching management, the International Diploma in Language Teaching Management. That's what it stands for. It's like I said, it's been going for 25 years. It covers more or less all of the areas of management, including things like finance, which many academic managers don't have to worry too much about, but it is also important to be able to talk about those things. And marketing and dealing with teachers, managing teachers, academic management, and so on. So it used to be a blended course, face to face and online, but since the pandemic, it's become entirely online. So it's much more easy for people to attend. We started a new group this week, a week ago, last Monday, and the next one starts in October this year. So it's I think it's a very good course. It's a very you do I know you took it yourself, Herod, um, and it's a very good way of approaching the idea of management, but from a very much from the perspective of a language school and a language program. So, we have people from universities, people from state schools, people from private language schools, all of whom have some kind of management role, whether they, in some cases, school owners, but in some cases, senior teachers, assistant directors, and so on. So that's the sort of a rough overview of what the Idletim is, and we're always looking for new people, and it's always great to have people from different countries, different parts of the world participating.
You did say I have done it. I have. It was exceptionally good. I've also got two of my staff members that have done it. Um, it is something that I value quite highly. I think it does. There's a lot of value in the course. One of the other courses I'm going to ask or mention at least is the DIP TESOL, which is what we run. Um, not so much management driven, more obviously teaching oriented. And I think a lot of people that end up being academic managers do have a DIP TESOL or a Delta. One of the things that's good about the DIP TESOL for me is that they've changed the format so you can do the four modules separately rather than together. And there is some leniency or leeway that some of the modules can be management related, especially academic management. But Andy, so on the topic of courses, I'm going to spotlight you so it is easier to see you. There we go. The first question really is, do you think there's still a place in today's world for qualifications like the DIP TESOL or the IDOTM, or do you think that the world's changing so quickly that qualifications cannot keep up?
No, I think there is a place, and I think that place. I mean, the qualifications and the trainers on those qualifications, or the tutors, or call them what you will, need to be adapting and need to be up to date and need to be thinking about how the modern world applies now. I mean, obviously, something like the DIP TESOL has been going a long time. Idletim's been going 25 years, as I just said. And things have changed in that time. Ideas about management, ideas about teaching. I mean, 20 years ago, teaching qualifications probably didn't mention the idea of dealing with emergent language, whereas now, presumably, they do. I hope they do. Um, and obviously, right now, we're all sort of dealing with the challenge, or the maybe the challenge, maybe the advantages brought to us by large language models, AI, and so on. Um, how do we deal with that? And obviously, those things are something that the courses themselves should be adapting towards. And also should be the trainers need to be up to date, so that the course is not talking about how do we do things 25 years ago. Is talking about how do we do things now, and because things change. I mean, management changes a lot. I mean, ideas about management, things about management, come to the fore all the time, as does teaching, obviously.
A bit of a follow-up on that, and if there isn't really an answer, then that's fine. I completely agree with what you said in terms of it's up to the trainers or the tutors or whatever they're called to adapt. Your course, the Edelton, is quite small in the sense that you have a very limited number of tutors. If you compare it to, for example, a Cambridge Delta, where there's centers all over the world, do you find that it's easier for a small place in the modern world to adapt quickly? And that has always been the case. But do you think that it's becoming a point where change happens so quickly that bigger organizations either need to really adapt or they're going to be left behind?
Um,
Especially from a teaching qualification or a management qualification point of view.
yeah, so in terms of those qualifications, I would say that, I mean, obviously for the Edelton, because there are only a few of us who are doing the training, we are a small group. I would say it's more easy to be sure that everybody is keeping up to date. Everyone is doing what they need to be doing. I mean, if I was in Cambridge or in London for Trinity and thinking about all these trainers all over the world, I wouldn't be sure that they were all doing that. I mean, probably they would, because they're all professionals, they're all very good people. But I'm not in, I can't know for a fact that they are teaching up to date stuff, or whether they're teaching stuff which is kind of outdated now. I mean, I'm assuming that they are all doing that, because, like I said, they're all sort of like, they're very kind of professionals who attend conferences and go to these things and are up to date with the field. But the idea of monitoring is more difficult. I think maybe that's the difference. Obviously, with large organizations, actually large organizations have some advantages over small organizations, because they have the opportunity to kind of bring different areas and form policy quicker than, for me, I wrote the policy that the IDLE team has for AI, the use of AI in assignments and so on. And I sort of had to draw from various sources for that, but I don't have a team of people who can work or survey people and do questions and work out what's the best way of doing that.
Let's move on to another question. So in Asia and probably in many other places where you have like smaller language schools or LTOs, some managers are often, or they've often described the academic manager as the buffer between the business owner and the teaching staff. So in like a post-COVID area where I think teacher burnout has become something that's talked about a lot more. Some people say it's at an all-time high. I can't confirm whether that's true or not. But do you think that buffer model is still sustainable, or do you think perhaps that's an oversimplification of what the actual reality on the ground is?
I'm not sure there's an alternative to the buffer model, really. I think the way I perceive the idea of the buffer is that the academic manager regards them is a sort of like, becomes the supporter and becomes the encourager of the teaching staff, or whoever it is they manage, and also advocates for them upwards, if you in the traditional organizational chart model. So it's kind of working with the teachers. What do you need? How can I, what would make things better for you? And then sort of combining that and advocating upwards if you need something from someone above. So that, and obviously the other part of the buffer is that sometimes you have to sort of explain new policies that have been handed down to you, which is the challenging part. But I would say that that idea hasn't gone away, and I think that idea is the way that academic managers should, because that's the way to support teachers in the best way. Because, and obviously, as you say, teacher burnout has increased, and manager burnout I think has increased too. And I think it is important that you, as academic manager, with your teachers, work together to work out what's doable, what's workable, how you can ensure that people aren't burning out, and advocate upwards that this is what we need. And if teachers are working too hard, if teachers are teaching too many hours, or expectations are too great on teachers, it's up to you as academic manager to forcefully say this is too much. You're pushing the teachers too hard. You're making these teachers work too many hours a week, and they need more time. They need to be able to do their job properly. So I think um, it's partly that it's that kind of, and I think the idea of kind of working together with the team and kind of and and coming up with something which you can present to the business side of the organization and say this is what we want and this is how we are measuring our success is a really good way of doing that. So you're not taking, because business management, they like numbers. So they tend to want, okay, we want this, we want that, and they're all quite financially based numbers. How many students must there be in a class, etc., etc. How many hours must a teacher teach? And rather than kind of trying to sort of argue in a way that the business people might see as a bit vague and a bit sort of wishy-washy, and saying, oh yeah, but teachers need these things, you can present numbers. This is what we're trying to achieve. This is what we're trying to want. The student feedback has increased by this number, or whatever it is. So you can push, if you like, your own agenda and turn it into numbers, because that's what business people are like. But I think that advocacy role, that buffer role, is really important.
Let's just say that in addition to that buffer role, how would the academic manager balance the needs of the team, in the sense of having a shared vision, knowing what they're working towards? If I think a lot of teachers are feeling like there's chaos in the world at the moment. So many things are changing. This is happening, that's happening. How do you suggest managers balance those different roles or different responsibilities?
I think that's an issue, if you like. That's not just a teacher issue. Obviously, the chaos of the world, all of those things are things that we're all dealing with. And the challenges of not just, it's not just the kind of the geopolitical situation. There's the sort of the challenges of teaching, the challenges of, I mean, what I sometimes hear it called late stage capitalism. How do we how do we approach that? And I think that's why, like, kind of taking their language, I'm saying their language, saying it's not my language, taking their language, the language of kind of numbers and money, and sort of success being measured only by the bottom line, and kind of using it to try and advocate for things which you really want. So if you can show that your team of teachers has improved student feedback by 1 point over the whatever it might be. I mean, you can structure this. I've written articles about this kind of thing. You can structure those conversations in such a way where you're presenting things from the perspective of a professional. I mean, some of your business managers are also are educators originally, but the ones who aren't, you need to kind of talk to them in their language in order to try and make that happen. I'm not sure if I answered your question there, but
no,
let me know.
It's also that I think for some of these things, it isn't possible to just go, we can answer the question in 2 or 3 minutes. I think there's so many complex areas to it. One of those areas that I do think also further complicate things is AI, or technology. So I think 2022, you published Leading Technological Change. We addressed things like the logistics of digital shifts. Now we've got AI, it's very prevalent. there's a tension in the sense that you have dip TESOL that focuses on that human aspect of language teaching and language learning. And on the other side, management that goes, we need the numbers, we want efficiency. So how can, I'm going to stick this, try to focus it on AI, my question, but if you want to move beyond it, that's fine. How can like an Idiotum trained leader ensure that something like AI is used to keep language human centric rather than it becoming a tool that leads to, I guess, academic cost cutting, like cheaper to make, faster to make materials, faster to plan lessons, you can pay teachers less, that kind of a approach to using AI?
Well, I think the sort of the management needs to be teacher centered. I mean, I think that's what I think that's, if you like, that's my philosophy, and that's the philosophy of the Idiotim, and I think it's the philosophy of many language schools and many managers, and it's also, if you like, the same philosophy that teaching, language teaching has had for the last number of years, is that, like, so language teaching is student centered. We're focusing on the students, we're focusing on their needs, what they want, and so on. And management, in my opinion, and if you like, my philosophy, is that uh, management needs to be teacher centered. How am I reaching the teachers and focusing on the teachers and their needs? I think yes, there will be a problem. There will be a problem. There is a problem in that AI will be used by unscrupulous people, and or people who sort of, money is the only object rather than education and learning and all those things. That there will be schools that become very, they use AI as to a degree where it's it's reducing quality, let's say, and it's less, as you said, human centric. It's less human centered, and I think, although I can't be sure, unfortunately, there will be a split. There will be a kind of a split between schools that are focused on the human and schools that are sort of focused on, let's call it, efficiency, getting things done as quickly and as cheaply as possible. And I think that split will, and probably already is happening. That split is already happening, and the question really will be, what do people want? What do people want from their education? So what does the market want? And there'll be some people who want the cheapest thing available, which may well not be particularly effective or good, but it's cheap. And we know that people go for cheap, but not everyone goes for cheap. And I think what people do is they go for what's best for them. And I think in education, people are aware of those things. I mean, I don't necessarily think this is going to be an easy question to cope with in the future, because I think we will struggle. We will struggle. I mean, language education will be challenged dramatically by AI, just as it will be challenged by not just the use of AI in teaching and learning, but it will be challenged by the idea of the use of AI in translation, where people feel like that I don't even need to learn a language because I can just stick my phone up to someone's mouth and I can hear exactly what they've just said. So I think there are challenges ahead, and there are challenges that we're already facing. And I think our job as managers is to focus on, what do people need? What do the students need? What do the teachers need? And how can we best make that happen? And how can we adapt the things we do to AI to, and work out, the things that we all know are a challenge with AI, like assessment, for example. How are we going to make that happen in the best way possible? Without it kind of sort of overwhelming everything we do and taking away from the skills of the teachers.
In follow up to what you said, I don't think, I do agree with you that I think that there's a lot of managers that are human centric. Not the topic of today in the sense of translation devices, but I do think they will lose that human element of uh, that we have when you speak another language and you can actually communicate and have fun with another person. Well, I do think those kind of things do cause teachers concern. Um, and I think, especially with, I think if you started teaching many years ago with the internet, I might have experienced something similar to, I think, what teachers are experiencing now with AI. And they reach like a 10-year mark and then they go, do I keep teaching? Do I try to become the best teacher I can? Do I move into management? Um, what do you think? What do you think would be a good way to advise teachers like this?
Honestly, I think that, I think there are, first of all, I think many teachers remain teachers all their all their career, in some cases 40 years. And I think that's absolutely, honestly, that's wonderful. Because I think teaching is such a powerful and important job, an important profession. And I think people who remain teachers, and obviously, as keep updating their skills, keep up to date with things, how things are changing, attend a professional development, and so on. I think that's wonderful. So I certainly wouldn't kind of want to say to a teacher who's at that 10-year period, yeah, you need to think about something else. I think we are sort of told that we need to be thinking about what's what's the step up, what's the next step for me. And I don't necessarily think we have to have a next step. I think that's a sort of a kind of a myth that the current culture suggests that, there's always got to be a promotion ahead of you. There's always got to be some kind of professional advancement ahead. Professional growth is enough, honestly. However, if someone is feeling like I'm a bit tired of teaching, I don't really want to be doing just teaching for the rest of my career. I'd like to try something else. I'd like to branch out and do something else. I think there are obviously there aren't many options. Honestly, there's teacher training, there's materials writing, there's management, and roughly that kind of covers it. Or there's maybe getting involved in assessment or what a curriculum development possibly. But those options are there, and I think sort of looking into those options and thinking about what do you want to do, how do you want your skills, for those teachers who are thinking, I'd like to branch out, I'd like to do something different, would be my suggestion. And obviously, management is not for everyone. Management is something that some people enjoy doing, some people sort of, but I certainly wouldn't encourage people to feel like they have to go into management because it's the logical place on the organizational chart to go after you've been doing something for a certain period of time. I think that's a mistake. And I also think that some schools make a mistake by trying to promote their best teachers into the office, into the manager's office. But, if that teacher wants to become a manager, then great. But if that teacher doesn't really want to become a manager, what you're doing is you're taking someone who's brilliant in the classroom and putting them in an office where they might be also brilliant, or they also might not be brilliant.
I don't think that issue is just related to education. Not that I'm saying you implied that. I mean, I grew up in the motor industry, and I think taking your best salesperson and making them sales manager is something that happens so frequently.
Yeah,
That
absolutely.
and then, so my question is kind of related to that. Whether that be a salesperson becoming a sales manager or a teacher becoming a teaching manager. Um, how do you prevent, other than doing a qualification, the feeling of imposter syndrome or the feeling that you don't belong? That you should have just stayed in the classroom, you should have stayed a salesperson if you want to do that role, but you feel like you're not equipped to do it. Because it is a completely different skill set to some extent.
Yes. Well, obviously there are qualifications like like the Eagleton, which are an excellent way of kind of sort of like making sure that the things you're doing are the things which have borne fruit in other contexts, not just your context, the way that the literature says is probably the best way to be doing things, and also to add to your skills. So that's what, that's what qualifications do. I think, I mean, to me, imposter syndrome is one of those interesting things where someone who has imposter syndrome, that strikes me as someone who's a human being. The people who don't have imposter syndrome are a bit sociopathic, in my opinion. It's like people who enter into a new job and then feel like, yeah, I'm perfect at this. They're the strange people who I'd worry about. People who kind of say, who go into a new job and sort of struggle, or struggle internally, thinking, I'm not sure I'm doing this well. Those are the people, honestly, I feel like they're the ones who are likely to become good at this job. So in fact, actually, imposter syndrome is one of those things which tells me that someone is going to develop properly into the person they need to be. Um, so I'm not sure I want to avoid a situation where people have imposter syndrome. I'd much rather uh, they they work with it. So when somebody thinks to themselves, I'm not sure if I know what I'm doing here, then that's the moment when I would hope they reach out, seek some kind of uh, support, whether that be network, whether it be talking to a colleague or a friend, whether it be taking a course, doing some kind of professional development in some way, reading an article about management, or reading a book, from Teacher to Manager and other management books, for example. Taking a look at what does the literature say, what do courses say, how can I do that? Because I think that imposter syndrome is a good driver for development. Actually, it helps you to become better at what you're doing. So I'm not opposed to
What
imposter
syndrome? No,
syndrome.
that makes sense. A kind of like a follow-up to that kind of question. I think sometimes, and it's not really what question I sent you, but it's something that I thought of when you spoke now. Both managers and teachers sometimes experience certain feelings that they try to suppress or push away. You mentioned that imposter syndrome is a good driving force to learn. Do you feel like there are other feelings or emotions that are also good motivators for people to improve or to learn?
Well, first of all, I think we have an innate desire to be better at what we do. And I mean, I think for teachers especially, that's very true, because teachers are presented with a group of people who arguably they're responsible. We are, as teachers, responsible for the learning of these people. And I therefore want to do the best possible thing I can do, because those people are relying on me. And I think as a manager, that's the way we ought to be thinking about the teachers as well. Those teachers rely on me to support them as much as they can, so they can support their students. So I think we have a natural desire to improve, to do our job as well as we can. And if you look at all of the literature on motivation and engagement, it basically says that there are 3 or 4 main drivers in what we do, and one of the key ones is growth. But development, self-development, professional growth, whatever it might be. That's mastery, I think it's called in some contexts. That ability to be better at what we do. And I think for people in education, that comes very clearly, because we want to be, because we can see the people who we are affecting. They're sitting in front of us, hanging on our words. And it's like, okay, I want to be the best person I can be for these students, whoever those students are, whether they're university students, 7-year-old children, whoever they are. You want to do the best you can for them, because they've trusted you, and you want to repay that trust. So I think we have that. There are, I mean, I guess there are other drivers that help us to become better at the job, but honestly, I think it's pretty much an innate thing. I think it's the majority of people, that's what motivates.
Somewhat related question, and I know when I get asked this question quite frequently, almost every second time that I do any kind of a presentation, people go and they ask me this question. So feel free to add context to your answer, because I think without context it's sometimes difficult. If you could give advice to, and I'll mention a few people, let's start with somebody that's starting off in ELT and they're brand new. What kind of advice would you give that person, considering the current, both geopolitical but also other things, the climate in which they'll enter into the ELT world?
Well, I guess there's two questions there. I feel like there's two
There,
questions
there
there.
are.
One question is, what advice would you give to a new teacher in terms of becoming a good teacher, becoming a successful teacher, an effective teacher? And then there's all that other stuff about what about how is sort of the geopolitical or
Yeah,
other
yeah.
context affecting that? So the first one, I would say, I mean, assuming, okay, so someone who wants to get into ELT, I would say take a pre-service training course first of all, because that's going to help you with all of those things. Having done a pre-service training course, and obviously many of them have, I think what I sort of observed, I've been a teacher trainer, I've done CELTA and other pre-service training courses like that in the past. One of the things I observe is when I notice a teacher has sort of like reached that kind of point of, I'm going to call it point of enlightenment. I think that's a bit strong, but it's when they I mean, I've seen it written down as they start teaching the students rather than the plan. And I think it what I suggest to people is that at any particular point, so if you're a new teacher and you're in a lesson and you're doing something, or the students are doing some kind of activity that you've set up, that you've created, stop for a second internally and say, why are they doing this? Because I think we sometimes forget, we start them, we plan, we know why we're doing things when we plan. And then when we're in the classroom, we've forgotten why we're doing these things. We're just doing them. We're just going through, okay, we said we're going to do this. I said I'm going to do this exercise next. So we're doing this exercise. But asking yourself why at any particular point helps you then to think, okay, this is why we're doing that. Therefore, this is what I want to see when they're done. This is what I want to be able to observe. And if I've forgotten that, if I'm just kind of if I'm making the students do an exercise and I've forgotten why, or I've stopped thinking about why, it means that I'm starting to think about the plan rather than the students. In terms of the other half of that question about the current situation in the world, I'm I'm somehow I feel slightly fortunate in the fact that I'm old because I can kind of I don't have to worry too much about those questions. And if I was a 23-year-old new teacher, I'm not sure how I'd feel, because there's all of this, these challenges in the world that we're facing that are huge. And I think what I would say is keep up to date, make sure you know what's going on in your profession, in your world. If you can attend conferences and stuff, that's great, because you get to see what people are talking about, what's the kind of what the buzz is. But obviously that's not always available to many people. But read, put aside half an hour a week just to read a couple of up-to-date articles in Modern English Teacher, or one of these kind of journals, or online, because because it's really, really important to be up to date with those things. We can't solve geopolitical problems, sadly, but we can, be aware of what those challenges are, and how do we face those challenges.
I'm going to add something to what you said. You mentioned Modern English Teacher. I think the same is true for many other those kinds of magazines. There are free ones, like IH Journal is free. I think Humanizing Language Teacher is free, but a lot of the ones we have to pay, they are free articles. And I do sometimes get asked if it's just reading the free article enough. Now, I think Modern English Teacher has a lot of good things where I would go, if you can, yeah, subscribe. It's very good. But often the things you find for free from those publishers, they tend to take the better stuff and make it free to attract you, and they're not taking the rubbish stuff and making it freely available. So yeah, if you can find that kind of thing, I do think reading, whether you're a new teacher or an experienced teacher, I think it's a very, very good habit to get into. A bit of a follow-up to that. In the context of now, if you were giving advice to an experienced teacher who was thinking of moving into management, but uncertain if they should, again, in the current climate, how would you advise that person?
You broke up a bit. I think my connection is weak. Can you ask the question again?
If you had to give advice to an experienced teacher looking to move into management, but they were uncertain for a variety of reasons, the current climate or their own experience, or how would you give that person advice?
I guess I would ask them, first of all, what do you want to achieve? Why do you want to be a manager? What do you think? Do you have an idea of what you want to accomplish as a manager? So, if there is someone who's saying, I want to be, I'm thinking of moving into management, okay, what does that look like to you? Because I think sometimes we look at management through the lens of how we've been managed, and not necessarily through our own lens of what do I want to achieve as a manager. I mean, obviously, I would also recommend they take a training course, but that's partly because that's what I do. But I think I really think it's important for people to think, well, what do I want to achieve? And if they can say, I've noticed that the teachers need support that they're not getting. I've noticed that the team is not really working as a team. I've noticed that we're not really getting the best out of what we have, the equipment and materials and so on that we have. And I would like to improve those things, and I have some ideas. Then I think that that person is thinking in the right way. They're thinking, you know, I feel like as a manager I could improve matters. Rather than I feel like management is just the next step, and I just feel like that's what I should be doing now, because I don't think that really helps. And I think we also end up tending to do, as I said, we manage in the way we've been managed, which isn't necessarily the way we should be doing things. It's about what do I want to achieve, and if we've got a goal, it's more likely that you're going to be successful in that goal.
I don't know how frequent you encounter it. I know it is something that does happen. People that have moved from teaching into management and then go, nah, and then they go back to the classroom. I actually have a very good friend who was a manager for very many, many years who decided that she wants to just teach again. And I spoke to her quite recently. She said, I haven't been happier in ages. How often do you find this where people feel like, okay, I've tried management, didn't like it, want to go back to the classroom?
It's quite often. I mean, I don't know, if I could sort of put a number on it, but yeah, quite a lot of people I meet, sort of go into management, at different levels. I mean, they might even rise quite high within sort of the management structure of an organization, and then go back into teaching. It's not that I wouldn't call it unusual. I mean, it's not that common, but it's also not, it's not something that when I notice, when I see it or when I hear about it, I don't think to myself, oh my God, that happened. It's like, yeah, and that's because teaching is a vocation. Teaching is something that is a really powerful thing to do, and sometimes people who move into management realize that they miss it, because it's a very motivating thing. Teaching is a very, very motivating profession. I mean, it also can be a very tiring profession, as we've already talked, but it's a very motivating profession, and there is quite common that people realize they're a bit adrift after a while. They're not getting that energizing feeling you get from teaching. There's this Sarah Mercer talks about distress and eustress, where we have stress in our life. Some of it's negative stress. That's this word distress, which we are familiar with. But there's this positive stress, which is eustress, which is a word which is less familiar to most of us, which is this feeling of the energy you get from a sort of positive stress. And I think teaching for most of us gives that kind of it's in the classroom. You don't have any space. You don't have any time. You can't sit down and read a book while you're teaching in the classroom. You are there. You are paying attention. You're really on. So it's quite stressful in that respect, but it's such a positive feeling that, and people miss that, and you can understand why they miss it. I mean, I miss it. I miss being in a training room. Since COVID, I've had much fewer opportunities to be in a face-to-face training room. I miss it.
I mean, I will add to what you've that both training and teaching. I think sometimes people would go to like a conference, you do a conference presentation, or you're doing webinars or something like that. And the feeling like 45 minutes or an hour with the group is very different from you're doing 10, 20, 30 hours and things start working. That kind of energy that you get really, yeah, I think I'm basically exactly what you've just said. It does energize you. A very last question for me, and then I will ask see if there's anybody else that has a question. A follow-up to the previous, would your advice be different to somebody that's an experienced manager that asks you for how do they stay on track, considering things are changing, there's AI, there's the geopolitical challenges in the world, there's so many things happening. How do they stay on track?
I think again, going back to, I think the challenge that, let's call it, experienced people have, whether it's experienced teachers or experienced managers, the challenge that they have is you start to forget, why did you do this? Why are you doing this job? This job becomes a job. You go to work on a Monday, you come home on a Friday, you get paid, and it's sort of like it's what I do. And I think reminding yourself, okay, why did I do this? What did I want to achieve from this? What did I want to what did I dream of doing when I took this job, is an important step, is an important thing to do. So sit back, take a step back from what you're doing and saying, well, why am I doing this? And what do I want to achieve? And how can I make this better? How can I make my own performance better? How can I make the school better? How can I make my teachers' lives better? How can I improve student learning within my organization as a manager? I think having the chance to take a step back and look at yourself, kind of, if you like, self audit, look at what you do, is really, really important. And I think this is true for probably any profession, to be able to do that and say, this is why I'm doing it. And at the end of that story, at the end of that, that might be the moment at which you think, well, actually, I want to go back in the classroom. I mean, it might well be, I don't feel I have anything more to offer. I've reached the limit of what I believe is possible in what I'm currently doing. So maybe I want to do something else, and whether that be moving on to another profession or moving back into the classroom or whatever it might be. I think those are the things that, it is important for people to do that, to kind of take a step back and think, why am I doing this, and what's the purpose of this? And I recommend in the courses that I teach, I recommend managers ask teachers to do the same thing. Ask teachers to think about, why are you doing teaching? Because people forget. People got into teaching for a lot of reasons, but most of those reasons are very human, very positive, very kind of let's go, extremely human-centered things to do. But after a time, you start to forget, and it becomes a job. It becomes what you do, and it's not why you do it. And taking a step back and reminding yourself why you do this is, again, like I talked earlier about motivation and engagement literature, mastery or development is something that is what motivates people. But purpose is the other thing, one of the other big things that having a reason, having a purpose. And if you don't feel like you have a purpose, or if you forget why you have a purpose, you're going to be unmotivated. And then it's going to be a big challenge. And there's always the option of like moving into a different field. I mean, you look at people in different countries who are now working as advocates for the teaching profession or the educational profession. Those people were teachers, often were managers, and have moved into that position because they realized that the things you talked about, the challenges that educators and education have, there needs to be someone who understands what's going on to try and influence policymakers, because that's incredibly important. And I mean, in a lot of countries, we have a huge challenge. Countries like Australia and the UK, and this and the US, where you've for a long time they had this easy to reach market of people who are desperate to learn English and come over to an English speaking country to do that. And then you've got politicians who see cutting student numbers as a way of making it look like they're doing something about immigration, this terrible thing, immigration. So rather than cut the other numbers, you cut student numbers, which is easy to do, but it's so self-destructive. It's so ridiculous. So I think you can work in that way. I mean, if you feel like things are not going the right way for education, for whatever reason, geopolitical reasons, local political reasons, things like technological reasons, working and advocating and pushing your own feelings about education is another way around that. And I think joining, maybe kind of working together in things like unions or associations, maybe is a way of achieving that in some cases.
Andy, thank you very much. I'm going to see if I don't think if there are any questions, please feel free to just unmute yourself and ask. Does anybody have any questions you'd like to ask Andy? Keith, yeah. And I don't know if you.
Yeah, got it. Okay. I was just wondering, we talked about AI a little bit, and I was wondering what areas you think we could use AI effectively in the classroom or in management, where it doesn't take away from the human experience you were talking about, and how can we let our business managers know that we can differentiate how our school can differentiate our school from other schools by emphasizing the human element as opposed to the AI element. So it's kind of two different questions there. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think we can sell the human element. And I think, sort of we can market ourselves as being a school which is focusing on the human element. Yeah. Maybe, not necessarily denying a technological component to our work, because obviously some people in the market want that too. I mean, we want to kind of to mix those things. So I think in terms of marketing, schools ought to be, and I think most of them are these days actually, are selling their human nature, their human-centric nature. And I think that needs to continue, because I think that's what's going to get you what you want.
Yeah.
What was the first part of the question again?
How could we, I mean, if we just ignore the AI element, schools will probably lose something there too. So what areas could we use the AI element in our teaching and our management to help the school, to help the teachers, without losing that human element?
From a management, I think I'll answer it from a management perspective. It's not. I'm not really an expert on teaching these days.
Okay.
I would say that AI is useful as a manager for what I might call delegating boring tasks. So as a manager, one of the challenges that managers face, and one of the challenges that I have to, I hear from managers when they work with managers, is this idea of delegating. Most people understand the value of delegating tasks, because obviously people who you delegate a task to learn some new skills because they're doing something new. But of course, there's always the feeling that some managers feel like, well, I'm not, I would rather do it myself, or it takes too long to explain it, or it's not really fair to ask the teachers to do this because they're already too busy. So I don't delegate. So I think one of the things that managers tend to do is to not delegate as much as they can. And I think one of the things they don't want to delegate is these boring tasks that because they feel like, well, I can't delegate that because it's such a boring task. I need to do it. It's only fair for me to do it. Right. So I think you can delegate to AI. I mean, a lot of these tasks you can delegate to AI, which is if you perceive AI as something that to which you can delegate things. Obviously, there's an element of learning that has to go on with that, because you've got to learn, how do I check the work of AI, which is obviously the big challenge for most of us with, we're using AI. So that would be my sort of preference for the use of AI. It retains the human element, because the human tasks are still being done by humans, but the kind of the boring, what's called algorithmic tasks, you're as much as possible, you're getting AI to do those things. And I'm going to leave aside the teacher one, because I think it's not my area of expertise.
I will add something to what Andy said. Just first, I think often when people speak about AI, there's a tendency to mentally think about ChatGPT rather than just there's other things that uses AI that isn't ChatGPT or Gemini. And I'm talking maybe more as a manager than as a teacher, but having something like the students, if they've completed their homework, let's say you're working with kids, because I think you do work mostly with kids, Keith. They've completed their homework for the week, or for the specific day, that it's just ticked off if they've done it. It's a lot easier for AI to identify a student who misses homework on a specific day every week, or who've missed an X amount of homework. So you have AI that does that, I guess, the boring task, where the human element would then be to come in and check with the parents if they're struggling on the specific day. Do they finish school very late on a Monday, so they never do their homework on a Tuesday? Do they need help with a specific kind of homework? I think sometimes, again, because I speak to people a lot very often, the moment you say AI, even managers around me would go, so how do you use ChatGPT to do that? Well, you're not talking just about ChatGPT. There are other elements of AI that you could use to do things like that. That does take a lot of that. You have to manually check everything out of the equation.